The night was dark on the alien world. The forest was silent, but not the silence of peace. It was the silence before something happens. The human explorer walked slowly, his boots pressing into the soft ground. Around him, giant trees stretched high, their leaves glowing faintly with strange blue light. The air was heavy, filled with mist that moved like ghosts between the trees. He kept his hand on his weapon, but his heart was uneasy. This world was not safe. He knew that. Yet something was pulling him deeper into the shadows. At first he thought it was only the wind, a low sound faint and broken like the sigh of the forest. But then he heard it again. A cry, not human, small, weak, but filled with pain. He froze. His eyes searched the darkness. His ears strained. There it was again. A sharp, trembling call, almost like a baby's cry, but not of any creature he had known before. The man's chest grew tight. He looked around, scanning the shadows. Every step he took seemed louder than it should. Something inside him whispered, "Don't go, it could be a trap." But another voice inside whispered louder, "What if it is something helpless? What if it is dying?" He moved carefully, pushing aside tall grass and glowing plants. The cry grew clearer. He followed it, heart beating faster. Each step felt longer, heavier, but the sound pulled him in like a magnet. Finally, he saw it. In the corner of a broken tree root, half buried under leaves, was a small creature. Its body was curled, shaking, and its skin glowed faintly with silver light. The man's eyes widened. It was a hatchling. Not of any animal he knew. Its wings were small, folded tight against its body. Its eyes were half closed, glowing a dull red, as if the light inside was fading. It looked fragile, almost broken, as if it would stop breathing at any moment. The man took a step closer. The hatchling flinched, letting out another weak cry. Its tiny claws scratched at the air, not in attack, but in fear. The man crouched down, his hands shaking slightly. He had fought many creatures in his life, but this was different. He was staring at life itself, struggling not to die. For a moment, he hesitated. Helping it could be dangerous. What if its parents were nearby? What if this was bait, a trap set by the wild predators of the forest? The thought of huge shadows watching him made his skin crawl. But then he looked again at the hatchling's weak, glowing eyes. They were filled not with danger, but with silent begging. A look that said, "Help me, please." The man's chest tightened. He reached slowly into his pack and pulled out a small water capsule. Carefully, he dropped a few drops near the creature's mouth. For a second, nothing happened. Then the hatchling's tiny tongue flicked out, tasting the water. It let out a soft, trembling sound, less a cry, more like relief. The man felt a strange warmth inside his heart. He looked around again. The forest was too quiet. No footsteps, no sound of large wings, only the mist moving between trees. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what he would do. He reached out his hand, slowly, carefully. The hatchling did not move away this time. Its claws shook as it tried to grip his glove. Its skin was warm, soft, but trembling with weakness. The man lifted it gently, his muscles tense, ready for anything. The hatchling was lighter than he thought, almost weightless, like holding a fragile flame. It curled against his chest, still shaking but no longer crying. Its small eyes opened a little wider now, glowing faint red against the darkness. For the first time, it looked calm, but the man did not feel calm. His heart beat faster. Every sound of the forest felt sharper now. He could almost feel eyes watching him, hidden in the dark. His instincts screamed at him, "Leave it, run, this is not your fight." But when he looked down at the creature so small and helpless in his arms, he knew he could not. The glowing trees above seemed to bend, their shadows stretching around him. The mist curled thicker, almost like a veil hiding the world. The man stood still, holding the hatchling. He felt a strange sense, as if the forest itself was testing him. The air was heavy, charged with something he could not name. For a long moment he listened. His ears caught every sound. The rustle of leaves, the whisper of distant winds, the faint hum of alien insects. But the only thing clear was the tiny, steady breath of the hatchling against his chest. That sound, fragile and weak, became the center of everything. He looked up at the sky through the tall, glowing trees. The stars above seemed brighter, sharper, watching him from the endless dark. He whispered under his breath, though he did not know why, "You'll live. I'll keep you alive." At that moment, he felt the shift. The air around him grew colder, heavier. Somewhere deep in the forest, far away but clear, a roar echoed. Low, thunderous, and full of power. The man froze. His eyes widened. That was no ordinary creature. That was something ancient, something that ruled the skies of this alien world, and now he was holding one of its young. He gripped the hatchling tighter, his breath sharp, his mind spun with fear and wonder. He had no idea what he had just done. He only knew one thing. Nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The man carried the hatchling carefully through the forest, his arms tense as if he was holding glass that could break at any second. The little creature was still weak, its breathing shallow, its tiny body glowing faintly like dying embers. Every step he took, he looked around, afraid that something big might jump out from the mist. The forest was full of dangers, but tonight it felt different, heavier, as if the shadows themselves were alive. He found a small cave not far from the glowing trees, hidden by thick vines. It was dark inside, but safe enough to rest. He gently placed the hatchling on a soft patch of moss and knelt down beside it. The creature made a faint sound, almost like a whisper. Its eyes half opened, glowing red and dim. He could see fear in those eyes, but also trust. The man felt a strange pull in his heart. From his pack, he took out a small container of water and a strip of dried food. Of course, this food was made for humans, not for an alien hatchling, but he crushed it, mixed it with a few drops of water, and held it close to the tiny mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. The hatchling did not move. He thought maybe it was too weak. But then slowly the small tongue flicked out and tasted it. The creature gave a soft sound, almost like relief. It tried again, taking a little more. The man smiled without knowing why. He felt lighter, as if he had just saved something important. But at the same time, he felt uneasy. He knew nothing about this creature. Was it poisonous? Was it dangerous? Could it grow into a monster that might one day kill him? He pushed the thought away. Right now it was helpless. Right now it needed him. As he watched, he noticed strange lines glowing faintly on its skin, almost like patterns or marks. They were not wounds. They looked natural, like signs written in light. The man leaned closer, staring in wonder. The glow moved slowly, pulsing, as if the creature's heartbeat was shining through its skin. It was beautiful, but also mysterious. He felt a shiver run down his back. The hatchling looked at him with its glowing eyes. They were no longer full of fear. Instead, they seemed to study him, almost as if it was trying to understand who he was. For a moment, the man felt like the tiny creature was reading his soul. He shook his head and laughed softly at himself. "I'm imagining things," he whispered, but deep inside he wasn't sure. The forest outside was still too quiet. He sat by the cave entrance, weapon in hand, eyes scanning the mist. Every shadow looked like it could move. Every sound felt like it could be the start of danger. But his ears kept returning to the soft sound behind him, the slow, steady breathing of the hatchling. That sound reminded him why he stayed. As the hours passed, the little creature tried to move. Its small wings stretched weakly, trembling but alive. Its claws scratched gently against the moss. It was stronger now, even if just a little. When the man moved closer, the hatchling made a soft chirping noise. Not a cry this time. It was something else, and a sound that felt like gratitude. The man blinked. He had fought wars, survived battles, seen death more times than he wanted to remember, but never had he heard a sound that touched him like this. It was simple, pure, the kind of sound that reminded him of why life was worth fighting for. He reached out his hand slowly. The hatchling did not pull away. Instead, it moved closer, pressing its small head against his fingers. A strange warmth spread through him. He could not explain it. It was not just the warmth of skin against skin. It was deeper, like a silent bond forming. For the first time in a long time, he did not feel alone. Still, his instincts warned him. The quiet forest, the glowing marks, the strange sense of being watched. Something was out there. He felt it. The way the air moved, the way the mist seemed to shift, as if hiding eyes that followed him. He gripped his weapon tighter, every nerve alert. But no danger came. Not yet. He turned back to the hatchling, which was now curled against the moss, eyes closing. The faint glow of its skin lit the cave in soft light, like a tiny star resting on the ground. The man sat beside it, tired but unable to look away. He wondered what kind of creature it would grow into. He wondered if saving it was the right choice. But then the hatchling gave a soft sound in its sleep, like a small sigh, and he knew there was no turning back. The man leaned against the cave wall, watching the entrance. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the fragile life he had just saved. Something told him this was no ordinary creature. The glowing marks, the powerful roar he had heard earlier, the silence of the forest, It all meant something. He just didn't know what yet. As his eyes grew heavy, he made a silent promise. Whatever this creature was, whatever danger it brought, he would not abandon it. He had already made his choice. And choices have consequences. Far away in the forest, deep beyond the mist, something moved. Large wings stretched in the darkness. A pair of giant eyes opened, glowing with power. The man did not see it. He only felt the cold air shift for a moment. But soon he would learn. He had saved a hatchling, and now the whole world would change because of it. The night was heavy, and the man could not sleep. He sat at the mouth of the cave, listening to the silence. The hatchling rested behind him, its faint glow spreading across the stone walls like the light of a dying lantern. Every now and then it made a soft sound, a small chirp, but mostly it lay still, breathing slowly, fighting for strength. The man's eyes scanned the forest. The mist had thickened, crawling low across the ground like a moving river. The glowing trees stood like silent guards, their branches swaying though there was no wind. The air felt strange, charged with something unseen. His instincts told him he was not alone. Suddenly, the hatchling stirred. It lifted its tiny head and gave a soft cry, sharper than before. The man turned quickly, his hand moving to his weapon. The little creature's glowing eyes stared past him, toward the forest. It was not just a cry of weakness this time. It was a warning, then he heard it. A deep thud on the ground, heavy, powerful, then another, and another. His heart raced. Something big was coming. The mist shifted, curling as if pushed aside by a giant presence. Shadows moved between the trees, huge and silent. The man gripped his weapon tightly. His breath caught in his chest, and then he saw them. From the darkness, shapes emerged. Massive, winged beasts, their scales glowing faintly under the alien light. Their eyes burned like embers, sharp and full of power. The man's stomach tightened. Dragons. Not the kind of dragons from human myths, but something even more real, more terrifying. Their bodies were long and strong, their wings spread wide, each movement making the air tremble. There were 3 of them at first, then more. They surrounded the cave slowly, their steps shaking the ground. The man stood frozen, every part of him screaming to run, but he knew there was no escape. Their glowing eyes locked on him, unblinking, unmerciful. He raised his weapon, though he knew it would not matter. Against such creatures, he was nothing more than an insect. The largest dragon stepped forward. Its scales shone with silver and blue, its wings folded tight against its massive body. Its head lowered and it sniffed the air. Then its eyes shifted to the small glow inside the cave, the hatchling. The little creature let out a weak cry. Its body trembled, but it did not try to hide. The man looked from the hatchling to the giant beast, his heart pounding. He realized in that moment what he had done. He had taken their young. The dragon's eyes locked on him. A low rumbling sound filled the air like thunder rolling through the ground. The man gritted his teeth, holding his weapon tighter even though he knew it would not help. He thought this was the end. Any second now they would crush him, burn him, tear him apart. But then something strange happened. The dragon's gaze shifted again to the hatchling. It stepped closer, lowering its massive head to the cave floor. The hatchling gave another small cry, but this time it sounded different. Not fear. Recognition. The little creature dragged itself closer to the man, pressing against his boot as if seeking protection. The man froze. His heart almost stopped. The hatchling was choosing him. Even in front of its own kind, it stayed with him. The giant dragon lifted its head slightly. Its burning eyes studied the human. It sniffed again, and then let out a sharp, powerful breath that shook his hair and clothes. But it did not attack. Instead, it made a deep, echoing sound, a roar, but not of anger. It was heavy, strong, like a voice from another world. The ground trembled. The other dragons answered, their roars filling the forest like rolling thunder. The man stood there, weapon lowered, his body frozen. He could not understand the meaning, but he could feel it. They were not attacking, they were acknowledging. The leader dragon stepped back slowly, its wings unfolding slightly, stretching into the night. Its glowing eyes never left the man. The smaller dragons moved closer to the hatchling, sniffing, watching, but still not attacking. The man's breath came in short bursts. He had no idea what was happening, only that he was still alive when he should not be. The hatchling gave another soft sound, this one almost happy. It pressed closer to him, as if showing the others that this human had saved it. The dragon seemed to understand. They did not strike. They did not burn him. Instead, they lowered their heads slightly as if in silent respect. The man felt his knees weaken. His heart was pounding so hard it hurt. He could barely believe what he was seeing. These creatures, powerful enough to crush him in an instant, were holding back. They were showing something he never expected. Restraint, recognition, maybe even respect. The largest dragon gave one final roar, so loud it shook the cave walls and made the ground tremble. The sound echoed through the forest, carrying far into the night. Then it turned away, its massive wings spreading wide. With a mighty push, it lifted into the air, the wind from its wings throwing dust and leaves across the ground. The others followed one by one, until the sky was filled with their glowing shapes. The man stood at the cave entrance, the hatchling pressed against his boot, both of them staring at the dragons as they vanished into the misty night sky. His body trembled, his breath uneven. He lowered his weapon slowly, hardly believing he was still alive. He looked down at the hatchling. It looked back up at him with glowing eyes, calm now, no longer afraid. For the first time, the man understood. By saving this small, fragile life, he had stepped into something far greater than himself. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The man did not sleep that night. His mind was full of the images of the dragons, their massive wings, their glowing eyes, the thunder of their roars. He could still feel the force of the air when they lifted into the sky, could still hear the sound echoing in his chest. It was not something he would ever forget. But what he remembered most was the way they had looked at him. They had not killed him. They had not taken the hatchling away. Somehow they had allowed him to keep it. When the morning light touched the forest, the mist began to fade. The trees shone with soft blue light, and the strange flowers opened with a glow like fireflies. The hatchling stretched its small wings and made a chirping sound stronger than before. The man looked at it closely. The glowing marks on its skin were brighter now, moving slowly like rivers of light. It looked healthier, stronger. He reached out his hand. The hatchling hopped closer and rubbed its small head against his glove. He felt a sudden warmth inside his chest. The bond between them was growing. It was more than just saving its life. Something deeper was happening, something he could not explain. As he stood, the hatchling followed him, stumbling at first but refusing to stay behind. It made little sounds every time he moved away, as if it did not want to be left alone. The man smiled faintly. "You really are sticking with me, huh?" he whispered. When he walked out of the cave, he noticed something strange. High in the sky, shadows moved. They were dragons flying in wide circles, their wings glinting in the sunlight. They were not attacking. They were watching, protecting. He felt a chill down his spine, but also a strange sense of safety. Somehow they had accepted him. The day passed with uneasy peace. The man hunted small animals for food, gathered water, and the hatchling stayed by his side. It chirped happily when he returned with food, even though it could not eat much yet. Sometimes it climbed onto his shoulder, its claws gripping lightly, its wings brushing against his face. He felt the weight of it, small but alive, and each time it made him feel less alone. At one point, he sat under a tall glowing tree staring at the horizon. The hatchling curled up on his lap, its tiny body warm against him. He thought of Earth, of the humans who were spread across the stars. He thought of soldiers, miners, hunters, all of them fighting to survive. If they found out about this creature, about these dragons, what would they do? He already knew the answer. They would not show mercy. They would not care about bonds. They would see danger and they would destroy it. The thought made his chest heavy. He looked at the hatchling again. It was so small now, so weak. But he had seen the massive beasts in the night. One day this little creature would grow into something just like them. Powerful, fearsome, impossible to stop. And yet, as it looked up at him with glowing red eyes, he felt no fear. Only trust. Later that evening, he built a small fire near the cave. The hatchling sat close, staring into the flames with wide eyes, making soft sounds as if trying to understand. Suddenly, the ground shook faintly. The man looked up quickly, his weapon ready. Out of the trees came one of the dragons. Not the largest, but still massive, its wings folding as it landed on the ground with a heavy thud. The man's breath caught. He held the hatchling close, expecting danger. But the giant dragon did not attack. Instead, it lowered its head, staring at the little one. The hatchling chirped and moved toward it. For a moment, the man thought it would leave him, but no. It stopped halfway, then turned back, pressing against his leg. The message was clear. It was choosing him again. The giant dragon let out a deep rumble, staring at the human with glowing eyes. Then it slowly stretched its wings, sending a rush of air across the fire, and lifted into the sky again. The man stood frozen, his heart racing. He realized what had just happened. The dragons were testing him, watching to see if the bond was real, and now they knew. The hatchling chirped happily, climbing onto his shoulder once more. The man sighed, half in fear, half in wonder. "What have you gotten me into?" he whispered. That night, when he lay down, the hatchling curled against his chest, its breathing steady and calm. He stared at the sky through the cave's mouth. Dragons flew high above, their glowing shapes drifting across the stars like silent guardians. He understood now. By saving the hatchling, he had not only earned its trust, he had earned the attention of the entire pack, and whether he was ready or not, he was part of them now. The days passed slowly, and the bond between the man and the hatchling grew stronger. The small creature no longer looked weak and dying. Its wings stretched more each day, its glowing marks brighter, its eyes full of life. It followed him everywhere, hopping after him when he walked, climbing onto his arm when he rested. Sometimes it even tried to spread its wings and glide clumsily from one rock to another. The man laughed when it failed, but he always lifted it back up, and the hatchling chirped happily, never giving up. The dragons above still circled the skies. Sometimes they came close, their giant wings blocking out the sun for a moment. Other times they only appeared as shadows far away. The man knew they were not just watching the hatchling. They were watching him too. Somehow they had accepted him into their circle. He felt both honored and afraid, but peace never lasts for long. One afternoon, as he was gathering water from a clear pool, he heard something that froze his blood. Voices. Human voices. He ducked low, pulling the hatchling close. Through the trees he saw a group of men walking carefully, their weapons shining under the strange light of the forest. Soldiers, hunters. They wore armor, their helmets glowing faintly with scanners. They were looking for something. The man's chest grew tight. He recognized the symbols on their suits. They were from one of the human colonies nearby, men trained to hunt and kill dangerous alien life. He listened carefully as they spoke. "Tracks are fresh," one said. "Yeah," another answered. "Something big has been moving around here. Command wants the area cleared." "What about the reports of glowing beasts?" a third voice asked. The first man laughed. "Glowing flying monsters. Sounds like stories to scare kids." "Whatever they are, we'll put them down." The man's fist tightened. They were here for the dragons. They would not care if the dragons were intelligent or peaceful. To them, anything powerful was a threat. And if they found the hatchling, he looked down at the small creature hiding against him, its red eyes glowing faintly. He knew what they would do. They would kill it without hesitation. The hatchling let out a soft sound, a frightened chirp. The man hushed it quickly, pressing a hand gently against its head. But the sound was enough. One of the soldiers turned sharply, scanning the area. "Did you hear that?" "Yeah, over there." The man's heart raced. He pulled the hatchling close and ran silently back to the cave, moving quickly between the trees. His boots barely touched the ground, his breath sharp and heavy. Behind him, the soldiers spread out, scanning the forest. He knew it was only a matter of time before they found him. When he reached the cave, he set the hatchling down and quickly covered the entrance with vines and leaves. The little creature chirped softly, sensing the danger. Its body glowed brighter, the markings pulsing like a warning signal. The man whispered, "Stay quiet, please, they must not find you." Minutes passed like hours. The voices came closer, the sound of boots against the ground, the clicking of weapons being armed. The man stayed still, his hand tight on his weapon, ready to fight if he had to, but deep inside he knew he could not win against all of them. Not alone. Then suddenly the forest trembled. A low rumble filled the air. The soldiers stopped, looking around nervously. From the distance, a roar shattered the silence, deep, thunderous, ancient. The man felt it shake through his bones. The dragons had heard. They were coming. The soldiers cursed, raising their weapons. What the hell was that? "Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, we'll kill it." The man's jaw tightened. He realized the truth. This was no longer just about him or the hatchling. This was war between humans and dragons. He had saved one small life, and now the pack would defend him in return. But the humans would not stop. They never did. The hatchling pressed against his leg, its body trembling, eyes glowing brighter. It chirped again, louder this time, almost as if calling to its kind. The man looked down at it, and for the first time he understood. The bond was complete. The little one was not just with him by chance. It had chosen him. Outside, the soldiers formed a line, weapons ready. The ground shook again as massive shapes moved through the forest. Wings cut through the mist, glowing eyes lit up the shadows. The pack had arrived. The man gripped his weapon, his mind racing. He was standing between two worlds. The humans who saw only danger and the dragons who would protect their kind at any cost. He could not remain silent anymore. He would have to choose, and deep inside he already knew his choice. He looked down at the hatchling, which stared back at him with glowing red eyes full of trust. The man whispered, "I won't let them take you." As the first dragon roared again, shaking the earth, and the soldiers shouted in fear, the man knew the peace was over. The real fight was about to begin. The forest was no longer quiet. It shook with the sound of heavy footsteps, the beating of giant wings, and the angry roars of dragons moving closer. The soldiers formed a tight circle, their weapons pointed outward, their helmets glowing as scanners locked onto shapes in the mist. The man stayed inside the cave with the hatchling pressed close to his chest. He could feel its small heart beating fast, could feel its fear, but also its strange power growing stronger with every sound from the dragons outside. The soldiers shouted to one another. "Stay sharp. Target movement at 3 o'clock. Big one incoming." Then it happened. With a force like thunder, a massive dragon landed in the clearing. Its wings spread wide, glowing blue and silver, its roar shaking the ground like an earthquake. The soldiers opened fire immediately. Beams of light shot into the night, striking the dragon's scales. Sparks burst, smoke rose, but the creature only growled louder, its eyes burning with fury. Another dragon appeared, then another. Soon the clearing was filled with their giant forms. The air smelled of smoke, fire, and fear. The man could see everything through the cracks of the cave. His body shook with tension. He knew he had to do something. If the soldiers won, the dragons would all die. If the dragons won, the soldiers would be destroyed. Either way, blood would fall and the hatchling might not survive. The hatchling suddenly cried out. A sharp, high sound that echoed into the clearing. The dragons paused for a moment, their eyes turning toward the cave. The soldiers also heard it. One of them shouted, "The nest! Over there!" Before the man could stop him, two soldiers moved toward the cave, weapons raised. The man's instincts took over. He stepped out, his weapon ready, standing in front of the entrance. His heart pounded, but he did not move aside. "Stand down," one soldier yelled. "Out of the way, man!" "That thing is dangerous," shouted the other. The man shook his head, his voice hard. "He'll have to go through me." The soldiers aimed, and for a moment it seemed they would shoot him. But before they could fire, a massive shadow passed overhead. A dragon swooped down, landing between them with a crash of wings. The soldiers stumbled back, terrified. The dragon lowered its head toward the man, its glowing eyes fixed on the hatchling behind him. And then slowly it turned its gaze toward the soldiers. The soldiers opened fire again, their weapons flashing bright. The dragon roared and swung its tail, smashing the ground. Trees cracked, the earth shook, and two men were thrown off their feet. Another dragon came down, spitting a stream of glowing fire that lit up the misty forest. Chaos filled the clearing. The soldiers fired desperately, their voices shouting over the roars. Dragons answered with wings, claws, and fire. The night turned into a storm of light and sound. Through it all, the man tried to shield the hatchling. He pulled it close and ran from cover to cover, the heat of fire and the sting of weapon blasts chasing him at every step. The hatchling cried out again, louder this time, its glowing marks burning bright like fire across its body. The sound cut through the noise of battle, and the dragons roared back, their fury doubling. It was as if the little one was commanding them, giving them strength. The man stumbled, a blast striking the ground near him. Dirt and fire exploded into the air. He fell hard, the hatchling tumbling from his arms. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself to rise. A soldier rushed forward, weapon aimed at the hatchling. "No!" the man shouted. He threw himself in front, his body shielding the small creature. The soldier fired, but before the blast could strike, a giant claw smashed down, knocking the weapon aside. The leader dragon stood there, its eyes burning with anger. It had saved him. The man looked up, his breath caught in his throat. For a moment, man and dragon locked eyes. He felt the weight of its gaze, the fire of its spirit, and then he understood. This was no longer just a fight between humans and beasts. This was a bond, a choice. The dragons were protecting him because he had protected one of their own. The battle raged on. Soldiers fell back, their weapons useless against the power of the pack. Dragons filled the sky, their wings blocking out the stars, their roars echoing like thunder. The man fought too, firing his weapon to push soldiers away from the hatchling. Each shot, each move was for the little creature that had chosen him. At last, the humans began to retreat. Their commander shouted, "Fall back! Fall back!" The survivors dragged the wounded with them, disappearing into the mist. The clearing grew quiet again except for the heavy breathing of the dragons and the crackle of burning trees. The man dropped to his knees, exhausted. His hands trembled, his chest heaved with every breath. The hatchling climbed onto his arm, chirping softly as if thanking him. He smiled weakly, his eyes wet with sweat and smoke. "You're safe," he whispered. "We made it." The leader dragon stepped closer, lowering its massive head. For a moment, the man thought it might attack, but instead it pressed its forehead gently against his shoulder. The touch was powerful, warm, almost like a blessing. Then the other dragons bowed their heads too, their glowing eyes soft. The man looked around in awe. He had risked his life for the hatchling, and now the entire pack had risked their lives for him. The bond was no longer just between him and the small creature. It was between him and them all. The forest slowly calmed. The smoke drifted away, the stars returned above. The man held the hatchling close, its tiny body glowing softly in his arms. He knew this was not the end. More humans would come. More battles would follow. But tonight he was not alone. He had a pack, and together they had survived. "No!" the man shouted. He threw himself in front, his body shielding the small creature. The soldier fired, but before the blast could strike, a giant claw smashed down, knocking the weapon aside. The leader dragon stood there, its eyes burning with anger. It had saved him. The man looked up, his breath caught in his throat. For a moment, man and dragon locked eyes. He felt the weight of its gaze, the fire of its spirit. And then he understood. This was no longer just a fight between humans and beasts. This was a bond, a choice. The dragons were protecting him because he had protected one of their own. The battle raged on. Soldiers fell back, their weapons useless against the power of the pack. Dragons filled the sky, their wings blocking out the stars, their roars echoing like thunder. The man fought too, firing his weapon to push soldiers away from the hatchling. Each shot, each move was for the little creature that had chosen him. At last, the humans began to retreat. Their commander shouted, "Fall back! Fall back!" The survivors dragged the wounded with them, disappearing into the mist. The clearing grew quiet again, except for the heavy breathing of the dragons and the crackle of burning trees. The man dropped to his knees, exhausted. His hands trembled, his chest heaved with every breath. The hatchling climbed onto his arm, chirping softly as if thanking him. He smiled weakly, his eyes wet with sweat and smoke. "You're safe," he whispered. "We made it." The leader dragon stepped closer, lowering its massive head. For a moment, the man thought it might attack, but instead it pressed its forehead gently against his shoulder. The touch was powerful, warm, almost like a blessing. Then the other dragons bowed their heads too, their glowing eyes soft. The man looked around in awe. He had risked his life for the hatchling, and now the entire pack had risked their lives for him. The bond was no longer just between him and the small creature. It was between him and them all. The forest slowly calmed. The smoke drifted away, the stars returned above. The man held the hatchling close, its tiny body glowing softly in his arms. He knew this was not the end. More humans would come. More battles would follow. But tonight he was not alone. He had a pack, and together they had survived. The forest was still burning in places, smoke rising slowly into the night sky. The man stood in the middle of the clearing, his body aching from the fight, his clothes torn, his hands shaking. Around him the dragons gathered in silence. Their glowing eyes shone through the mist, watching him, studying him, but not with anger. There was something else in their gaze now. Respect. The hatchling sat in his arms, its tiny body glowing faintly, its breathing calm again. It let out a soft chirp, a sound so gentle that it seemed to quiet the whole forest. The dragons responded with low rumbles, deep and powerful like voices of the earth. The man looked up at them, unsure what would happen next. Would they take the hatchling back? Would they finally see him as an intruder? Then the largest dragon, the leader, stepped forward. Its massive wings folded against its body as it lowered its head slowly. Its glowing eyes locked with the man's. For a moment, time stopped. The man felt small under its gaze, like a grain of sand before a mountain. But then the dragon did something unexpected. It bowed. The ground shook slightly as its head touched the earth. The other dragons followed, lowering their heads one by one until the whole pack bowed before him. The man's breath caught. He could not move, could not speak. He was just a human, fragile and weak compared to them. Yet here they were, showing him loyalty. The hatchling climbed onto his shoulder, its claws gripping gently, its wings spreading a little as it chirped loudly into the night. The sound echoed across the clearing, a call filled with pride. The dragons answered with a roar that shook the stars. It was not a roar of war. It was a roar of unity. The man felt the weight of the moment sink deep into his heart. He understood what had happened. By saving the small hatchling, he had gained something no human had ever earned before, the loyalty of an entire dragon pack. He slowly lowered his weapon to the ground. He did not need it anymore. His protection was no longer steel and fire. It was the wings and claws of being stronger than any human army. As the night went on, the dragons surrounded him in a great circle. Some spread their wings, blocking the cold wind. Others stood tall, watching the shadows of the forest to keep him safe. For the first time in his life, the man felt completely guarded, as if nothing in the world could harm him now. He sat on the ground, the hatchling resting on his shoulder, and looked up at the alien sky. The stars stretched endlessly above, bright and sharp, and for once they did not make him feel alone. He was part of something bigger now, but he also knew the truth. The humans would come back. They had seen the dragons. They had seen the power. They would not stop. One day, more soldiers, more hunters, maybe even armies would arrive. The thought made his chest heavy. The hatchling chirped softly, rubbing its head against his neck. The man smiled faintly and whispered, "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." The leader dragon moved closer again, lowering its head until it was only a breath away. The man slowly reached out a hand. His fingers touched the warm, glowing scales. He felt the heartbeat of the great beast, strong and steady, like the pulse of the world itself. And in that heartbeat he felt trust. The other dragons roared once more, lifting their heads to the sky. Their voices shook the forest, sending a message that carried far and wide. The man realized what they were declaring, that he was one of them now. Not a stranger, not an intruder, family. His eyes stung with emotion. He had come to this world as just another explorer, another human fighting to survive. But now he had something greater than survival. He had purpose. He had loyalty. And he had the strength of an entire pack of dragons at his side. The fire in the forest slowly died down. The mist returned, curling around the glowing trees. The night grew calm again, but it was no longer the same night as before. Something had changed forever. The man stood tall, the hatchling perched proudly on his shoulder. He looked around at the circle of dragons, at their glowing eyes, their folded wings, their silent power. Then he looked back at the sky. In that moment, he knew his life was no longer his own. He was bound to them, and they were bound to him. The bond could never be broken. The leader dragon let out one final roar, the loudest of all, shaking the stars themselves. The others joined, their voices rising together like a storm. The man stood in the middle, the sound washing over him, filling him with strength, with pride, with belonging. When the last roar faded, silence returned. But it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of peace, of understanding, of unity. The man took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "I'm not alone anymore." The hatchling chirped in reply, its tiny wings spreading as if it understood. The dragons shifted around him, guardians of fire and sky, and the man knew that from this night onward, he was part of their world, and nothing would ever be the same again.